All right, thank you for staying with Daybreak. We're about to start that discussion. Later on, we'll be talking about the clamor by MCAs to have their salaries increased, and we're asking you, do they deserve a pay rise? That's a question. Trevor Mbija at Citizen TV Kenya used the hashtag Daybreak. But before we get into that, we're going to talk about the finance bill and whether the president should assent to it or not. Let me introduce my guest one more time. Starting from my right, Honorable Joe Nyutu is here, Senator for Moranga. Asante for making time. Honorable Grace Bahati, MCA for Cheleni Ward, Machakos County. Thank you for making time. Honorable Shege Mwaura, MCA Ngara and Secretary General, County Assemblies Forum. Asante sana for making time. And Kevin Osido, Executive Director, County Governance Watch, joining us on Zoom. Asante sana for making time. This is the conversation on all the front pages here. Raila, the wounded general, and also there's talking about bracing yourself for a new reality as Ruto taxes take effect. Hustlers' pain begins. Honorable Nyoto, I'll start with you. Should the president assent to the finance bill?
Thank you, Trevor, and good morning. Yes, I think the president should assent to the finance bill because I have not seen or heard any very compelling reasons why he shouldn't. And this is a bill that passed in the House with an overwhelming majority of 180 legislators against, I think, 80-something. Who voted no. And so I think the president should go ahead then and assent to the bill because that is what the representatives of the people at the National Assembly felt. They think that it is a good bill.
But are you concerned that this bill will essentially increase the cost of living for people who are already disenfranchised?
Yes, I'm very concerned that it will raise the cost of living. But Trevor, sometimes it's about the situation that you find yourself in. We know that there'll be some painful effects of this bill, and no one would say that it's going to be easy. But then sometimes you have to bite the bullet. Sometimes you have to make a sacrifice because of the situation you find yourself in. And you know, we find ourselves here because of the debt situation that we are in. And so it has been an issue of, do we continue borrowing, or do we then have to sacrifice a little bit more in order for us maybe to gain footing, in order for us to be at a place where maybe we can slowly start maybe, improving the economic situation we find ourselves in. And Trevor, if you allow me, so far Kenyans agree that President Kibaki is the best president ever. But those of us that were there when he came in, that were able to follow what he did, if you want to remember, life was very hard at the beginning because he also used the same policies that His Excellency the President William Ruto is using, that of trying to raise revenue locally or from the domestic space other than borrow. And so, yes, to answer your question once again, I know life is going to be very hard, but in the long run, things are going to improve, and I believe that Kenyans are going to be happy that they sacrificed now. Yeah.
Honorable Bahati, should we bite the bullet, like Honorable Nyutu is saying?
Thank you, Trevor. I believe we've come to that situation. If the president doesn't, then we are doomed. If he does, they're still doomed. So it's about our Kenyans now to brace ourselves for harder, tougher economic times. But then we also have to look on the positive sides of the bill. Personally, having so much interest in education, you can see we are going to be one of the best beneficiaries out of the bill. So I believe we have the best sides of the bill, but also, yes, it's us as MCAs being back there at the normal mwananchi, the common mwananchi. It's going to be tougher, and it's something that we are actually really dreading to see how tough it's going to be for our country and for our people.
Yeah, it's going to be tough. And what are the people telling you? I mean, you're the MCAs, you interact with them one-on-one. Can they stand this increased taxes on them?
Definitely they can't stand it. That's what's on the ground, that I can tell you for a fact. Yeah. The people are not happy about it. But yet, it's where we are as a nation. What do we do? Because this is one of the greatest bills, budget we've ever passed as a nation. So even when you do the math, we'll still have a gap that will still either borrow locally or internationally. So it's going to be tough for them, and definitely a majority of our Kenyans, personally, from where I come from, they're not happy about the bill.
Okay.
Yeah.
Shege, should the president simply send this back with recommendations and review?
Thanks, Trevor. First and foremost is to say two things. Yeah. Number one is that the finance bill is the whole budget. There's an appropriations bill, and then there's a finance bill. Appropriations is basically what you budget for, even including your house. The finance is how you're going to, where you're going to get the money to implement what you've proposed as a budget. So they go hand in hand. There's a very, it was a very ambitious budget of a 3 trillion. Kenyans are also very demanding when it comes to development and all the other things that you want. And the government is quite huge. So the finance bill now comes in to look for money to support it. So you can't have, on one hand, a big budget and not have a big finance bill. So they go hand in hand. That's one. Number two is that this was a government-sponsored bill, which you saw the president coming out, his core people pushing in, the majority side coming, the majority leader and all that. So he owns this bill. So there's no way it can go to him and he doesn't sign. So, of course, there's also the majority and the minority side. The minority had their say. They had their own, fights and keleles here and there, and it worked because the housing fund, remember, that made rounds, was able to come down from 3 to 1.5%, remove the employers out of the equation and all that. So the minority side didn't have the numbers to stop it. So it can't now get to the desk of the president and he refuses to sign. But having said that, is that I usually say the proof of the pudding, as they say, is in the eating. Yeah. See, 12 months is not a long time. You, as a watchdog or the fourth estate, will be here to follow through every step of the way. 3 months, 6 months, how is it coming? And remember, they've also had they've really strengthened their revenue collection channel, which is KRA, to be able to go for the people who are supposed to get this money. Yeah. So what maybe would be a bit we need to look at is the movement from the threshold of the debt from 10 trillion to being pegged to the GDP. Yeah. So somehow we need to find a way of growing the GDP so that as we grow our capacity of borrowing higher, yeah, then they also we grow our economy to be able to adopt and be able to handle the pressures that come with a big, ambitious budget.
Yeah, but Shege, there's a big difference between the majority in parliament and majority of the people you speak to as MCAs. Mm-hmm. Have you had that sense of division from the people saying, some of them saying that, yeah, we want these taxes to come, we are ready for them? Or is it a blanket, we can't sustain it because we are already pressed economically?
There are two levels. You see, even the county governments are expecting money from the national government. The 15% that goes to the county comes from the 85% from the whole national budget. And all counties, including Nairobi, expect a lot. Some counties, I think, is wholly 100% dependent on national coffers. So it would be folly also to, on one hand, you want money to take to the counties for devolution and development, but on the other hand, the national government is telling you we need to raise money this way. You do not want, and here we are fighting for additional resources to go to the counties. So from the county's point of view, I think the most important thing is what share are we going to get, and in timely manner. You remember this time round, government was struggling to give remittances to the counties, backlogs of about 4 months. So I hope the reworking of the finance bill, including how money should be transmitted to KRA within a week and all that, will help ease remittances from national government to the counties so that you do not get those kinds of delays. Remember, the national government, maybe they can dip into a bit of domestic borrowing in terms of treasury bills and bonds. In the counties, if we get cash strapped, you just go for overdrafts. And overdrafts are from commercial banks, and they're expensive. Yeah. And If we dip into that, then of course the ripple effects is on recurrent expenditures and money that is supposed to go to development also hampered and all that kind of a thing. So I think it's a collective way as a country we need to look at. Let's support the position because now it's it has been passed. Let's see what's going to happen within 6 months, within 12 months. And then now, hopefully in the next cycle, now people will be basing the arguments from, we gave you what you wanted. Yeah. What did we get in return?
Okay. Yeah. Let me bring in Osido on this. And Osido, should this bill be assented to? And I know the answer is almost obvious, but the question is not will it or will it not. The question is, should it be assented to?
Trevor, thank you so much for this opportunity, and I would have loved to be with you in studio, but I'm here in Nyeri, courtesy of the World Scouts Parliamentary Scouts Union, which is hosting for the first time in Africa, a global conference that brings together parliamentarians who are Scouts members and decision makers, basically to deliberate around the role of Scouting in climate change mitigation, and largely looking at how to involve young people in driving the global agenda of Africa Union 2063 and also the Sustainable Development Goals. Now, to the main issue, the bill, as you rightfully said, will be assented to. Should it not be? It shouldn't be. Why do I say it shouldn't be? Because if you look at the degree of public participation that the parliamentary committee took Kenyans through, which I really liked, because of course every year, every government term, we have public participation processes on the budget by constitution and our various public finance management acts and the laws that guide the budget process and appropriation issues. A large number of Kenyans are uncomfortable with a number of the proposals that were made by Treasury. Unfortunately, government has to be run, and so from 1st July, when the budget has a green light to be rolled out, the president, in his view, and being the person behind the Kenya Kwanza government, and we have heard and seen him really advocating for and plotting for this particular budget, I am sure that he is going to assent into it, and I would have loved for him to give us a memorandum on some of the issues that Kenyans are uncomfortable with. But unfortunately, I don't see that coming from the head of state. Trevor, I am largely uncomfortable with the degree of misuse in this government. And if you look at the kind of deficit that Treasury gave to us, which is about 718 billion, if you listen to the comments by the former president, His Excellency Uhuru Kenyatta, he told us that Kenyans lose 2 billion shillings every day. Now, give that to an annual estimate. It means that Kenyans are losing, or the government of Kenya is losing, 730 billion shillings. Kenya Kwanza government, even as we talk about streams of revenue generation, on-source revenue for county governments, which I also don't think the Kenya Kwanza government is really helping counties to be able to enhance and strengthen on-source revenue collection from counties. I haven't heard the government being very strong insofar as what it wants to do with corruption so that we are able to save the 730 billion. Because if you look at the deficit against the 730 billion, that if we are able to deal with the corruption issues and the gaps of our maize and malgovernance, then the government doesn't need to push Kenyans, because some of the reasons why, of course, why the president has indicated increments in some of the taxations is largely that we want to not borrow, but we want to be able to generate revenue locally. And I'm happy that the president even had a conversation with KRA. But how come KRA has also not been able to meet its annual targets of revenue collection and generation? So there is a big conversation, Trevor, that I think that we need to be having, as opposed to government pushing Kenyans, because we are pushing Kenyans, but we're not showing them really the value for the money. We are pushing Kenyans, but we are not showing them the fiducious aspects of positivity and progress that government is doing. So that, for example, why do you want to expand government and have CSS and have this huge wage bill within government, as opposed to service delivery, and you're not telling Kenyans give us this as we give you that. So that government says, increase the tax, and we show you how much steps we are also contributing to be able to soften and make the landscape easy for you as a Kenyan. Increase the taxation, and we ensure that service delivery is working for you. So you go to some of these places and there are no roads, Trevor. You go to the mamambogas and they don't have sheds to do their business. You go to some of the corners of this country and people don't have water. Education is an issue, infrastructure concerns. So government is milking the cow, but is unfortunately not feeding the cow. And sadly to say, the government has to run. So the bill has to be assented.
Yeah, but Kevin, isn't what you're saying the exact reason why it should be assented? Because there are certain places that, like you mentioned, there are no roads, there's no water, so the government is trying to ensure that there is development in those different places. Where do they get the money from?
The government has to get the money, but what I am saying is make it easy for Kenyans. For example, one, ease of doing business. How is the business environment? We can't be saying, for example, Trevor, that we want to tax certain sectors of the economy without necessarily formalizing them. So that, for example, if you look at the number of boda operators in Kenya, it goes into more than 280,000 young men and women engaged in this particular process. You go to the mamamboga businesses, and for example, if you pick one issue, for instance, where government says that they want to increase taxation for fish imports, and you go to the Lake region and you talk to the fishmongers, how has government enhanced and built your capacity? Of course, it's a good thing to increase taxation for fish industry and fish imports for Kenya, but how are we, for example, building the capacity of people in the fishing industry? Do we have an industry within, for example, the Lake region where people can easily be able to ensure or see that actually government is investing in us? So what I'm saying in short is that the government is giving from one angle and is also taking from the other angle. So in terms of increasing or raising revenue for government to be able to deliver those services, we have to see certain goodwill aspects of what government is contributing. Okay. Because what the finance bill has done and what this particular finance proposals are doing is making it easy for Kenyans, but also tightening it so that we don't see the accrual benefits. And so it's a bigger conversation that I think that we need to be having.
Yeah. Newton, are you buying that argument before I take a quick break that you need to spur growth first and then tax?
Well, Trevor, it's an interesting argument because this government is just about 9 months old. If you say that it has not been able to spur growth, it has not built capacity for traders, then the question would be, have you given it time to do that? And in any case, and that is the same thing that you raised with him, is you need money to do that. And I think touching very quickly on some of the things that he has said, he has talked about the government not building the capacity, for example, of bodabodas. And I was wondering whether he heard what the president has said about the plan that he has for bodaboda operators, that because of the biting prices of fuel, petrol and what have you, that the government is working on seeing to it that we can be able to get bodabodas, perhaps maybe later this year, that will be electric. Not, I mean, that is a good plan that the government has when it talks about fish that people have not been empowered. I think if you expand the local market for these fishmongers and fishermen, I think then you'll be boosting. Once the market is boosted, then we can talk about other things, like maybe building capacity for them, seeing to it that, for example, they get nets at maybe more favorable prices, and maybe refrigeration, such things, which will follow and which need money. Yeah. So the first thing I think the government needs is money to roll out these very good ideas that people have. But I want to agree with him that government must do the best it can to see to it that we do not have hemorrhage of public resources. That one, we are agreed on that. We cannot afford as a country to continue losing, like he said, or like the former President Uhuru Kenyatta said, we cannot continue having a hemorrhage of 2 billion in a day. I mean, that is something we cannot afford. That is something we cannot stand. But I also want to say that the president has shown that he is very committed to arresting corruption. And if you allow me, I'll cite some two cases. I mean, when it was reported that there was, when there was alleged corruption at KEMSA, you know, when we lost that very good tender, the president swung into action very fast, fired people. When we heard that, when you people reported that there was a problem with some sugar that was not fit for human consumption and which had somehow found its way into the market, the president again acted very fast. So I think there are indications that President William Ruto is very committed to arresting corruption, because we are all agreed, Azimio, Kenya Kwanza, all of us are agreed that corruption must be weeded, that we cannot continue losing money to corruption. So we are agreed on that.
Okay.
But for the other things, I think we need money in order for us as government to be able to offer the solutions that people are talking about.
Okay. But what are the people saying? You know, that's why I keep coming to you, because first of all, you're an independent MCA, so you don't lean on any of the sides. What are they recommending themselves in terms of taxation? Are they agreeable to being taxed, or what do they recommend?
Trevor, I think it's very important also as politicians to be speaking the truth, and part of that also bring real solutions and back it up with actions. One of the reasons our people are actually talking about, this was a hustler a nation. That's what our president actually did, sell this manifesto to our people. And when we speak about hustlers, we are saying if the fuel levy is going to double, then what happens to our boda riders, our normal Mwende or Wanjiko in the ground? And that's one of the things we are saying. Right now, the prices of unga, you can say they're about to shoot up more than what even our people can be able to afford. As MCAs, it's actually harder when you come, very early in the morning, people be knocking your doors and be like, actually, I did not have a meal. So if this normal person didn't have a meal on their table and these taxes are about to go up, then what happens to them? And of course, it's very important, even as a nation, to come with solutions of how can we support maybe our farmers, how we can support, because these are normal daily lives. They're harvesting right now, especially in Machakos, we had shortage of rain. So it means that even the harvesting season, they're not going to harvest as what they would have expected. So it's a tough, like I said, it's a tough situation where, of course, as a country, we need money. We need money to be able to survive. Even our counties, we actually did suffer for a couple of months. We didn't have money. So I can say it's a tough one on our president to make a decision. Okay. I know it's going to be a tough one, but by the end of the day, we also need to come up with real solutions and back them up with actions.
People literally come to your doorstep and tell you, I simply did not have a meal last evening. Definitely.
You can ask any elected member of county assembly in this nation. It's a common thing. Getting a call, it's a common thing. My child has been chased out of school, sent home for school fees. I don't have a meal, the medical bill. Right now, actually, one of the issues we had was the NHIF scandal. Someone thought they were covered, but after that, you are discharged, but you can't even be able to pay for your bills. Yeah. So we are the very first contact of issues with our common mwananchi. So it's a tough one, and that's why we're saying, even for us, MC, we can feel the heat of this bill, and definitely we'll be the first people to feel it even more after it passes.
Yeah. Shege, what Bahati is saying is why I'm digging in on this conversation, because yes, there are the realities of the government, senior officials and executive, pushing the agenda of getting in more money. Yeah. But then there's the people on the ground who are literally pushed to the wall. They cannot move a single inch. How then do you tax a people who already feel overtaxed? Shouldn't you spur growth first before you tax them? Isn't that where the priorities should be as a government?
Trevor, I agree with you. It's just that the fundamentals of how this thing works is that you cannot stop everything, first of all, to grow the economy and then now come and tax. They have to go hand in hand. Because if you look at the structure of that finance bill, is that, of course, there are areas that are going to be hit, there are areas that are not going to be hit as much. Give a good example, the current government is doing a lot with production, especially on issues like fertilizer, farm machinery, so that they grow the sector the agricultural sector in that regard. If you look at the areas within industry, like manufacturing and all that, the taxation now is going to be more on imported furniture and all that, so that you reduce the people who are going for goods outside and go to the Juakali artisans, so that now the hustler element comes in. And we now find a way of strengthening production of, furniture and those kinds of things locally. So it's a give and take. So the question, and whichever way you'll do a finance bill, there will always be hits. I mean, usually in the former regime, hits were in, of course, beer, those syntax, cigarettes and all that. Now, they are also looking at areas where they can widen as much people as possible, so that maybe it becomes a bit less if all of us. And the most important thing I think maybe government should be looking at is how do we bring more people into the grid? You know, all of us who are salaried, all of us who are in formal employment, we are in the tax bracket. How do we now go for the people who, with all these businesses and do zero returns and all, how do you now find a way of bringing them on board so that the pressure becomes lower when all of us are bearing their own load of taxation, so that we're able to jitegemea, as Kibaki used to say. So the most important thing is to look at whichever way you're going to look at it, or everyone is going to be hit here and then also be helped here. So that kind of a thing. I mean, a big thing like tourism, what are the incentives that you're going to make so that these people who come bring dollars or whatever it is find a very comfortable environment for them to fly in? And then again, the kind of, how do we support, how do we reduce production of electricity so that our manufacturing goes down? How do we spread these processing zones? Remember, there's a huge market. You go to Ethiopia, DRC, all these surrounding countries, really their manufacturing is not as developed as this country. Yeah. Is there potential? Is that potential there? And how do we tap into it? How do we also do infrastructure so that we are able to access these markets more easily? And how do we also support security in around these areas? For widening, these business people that you want to tax, how are you also helping them so that they are growing and they're strong enough to earn more so that you can tax more? So it's a give and take, and the mandarins at Treasury should be working their heads all at every given second. Yeah. How do we also make it wide, and how do we make it easier for people to pay as much as possible? Okay. I mean, remember, even the rentals have come down from 10 to 7, hopefully so that more people can now come out. And also, again, how do we help them in terms of titling? So that they're also able to get documents so that they can go get loans against them and spur that growth in that direction. So it's not about these guys are saying this. We are all in this as a country. So how do we support this movement so that we're able to grow the economy together so that everyone is able to fit into the grid and be able to do what they're supposed to do?
All right. Kevin, as we wind up on this conversation so that we start on the other issues around MCAs and the county assemblies, stalemate, just a quick one on this one. What would you want the government to do? Because they're caught between a rock and a hard place. They can't subsidize consumption, which is the only other option if now you want to ease people into this economy. You have to subsidize consumption, but that in itself has not been sustainable. The only other option is to subsidize production, which is what they have said. In fact, even right now, unga prices are set to shoot up because millers say out of the subsidy program, they're still owed 2.5 billion shillings. So what do you want the government to do now?
If I was given the opportunity to advise His Excellency the President at this very last tail end of the process, because we've had our say, we've made our voices count where it was possible during the public participation process, especially coming a number of weeks post-COVID-19 and the consequences of COVID-19 and the stories around companies and big multilaterals closing shop from the Republic of Kenya and moving to other zones or regions and countries. I would have asked Cecil as the President, in fact, what I would propose to the government to do is, one, seal the corruption loopholes and show Kenyans that, yes, the estimate of what we think we lose based on what a former head of state said is at 2 billion. And then you walk through with Kenyans and update them on the recoveries, including monies that are in offshore accounts in countries outside Kenya. so that you update us on what you are doing based on the information that Kenyans have.
Okay.
There's really nothing much other than what the senator says, which is a good political goodwill, and I thank the president for showing political goodwill on war on corruption.
Okay.
But Kenyans are asking for more. We're asking for more. Number two is what Mheshimiwa Chege Mwaura has said. Formalize the informal.
Okay.
So that we know, for example, how many mama mbogas do we have and their kiosks, and then what are we doing to be able to tax them, because counties are taxing them, but there is no show for services, for service delivery. Number two is the Boda Boda, and of course the senator has talked about electricity, and one chairman of the Boda Boda Association from our county is asking me, please ask the senator, how will we electrify or fuel the electric Boda Bodas? They will need power or energy, whatever source of it is. Formalize that sector so that we tax them, widen the tax base, we know who they are, because government has a database of who is in Boda Boda. Then we can now tax them and show them what that tax is doing for them. So there are measures, Trevor, which I think the government, if it listened to a number of the voices that spoke to the budget committee, budget and finance committee during the public participation process, there are things that government can be able to. But I know that government has to raise revenue by, of course, pushing Kenyans, and so Kenyans should be ready to bite that bullet.
Okay. Let's take a quick break here. Now, when you come back, we talk about the MCA's push and the county's assembly stalemate. They had given all the 47 county assemblies threatened to adjourn indefinitely and shut down ward administration duties in a week's time. That was last week, if their allowances and welfare is not addressed. We'll talk about that in just a bit. Keep your views coming at Trevor Mbija at Citizen TV Kenya. Use the hashtag Daybreak. See you in a bit.